Hi, folks. Welcome. I'm Dan McDermott. This is the McDermott Report. We're broadcasting live from Front Royal and from Bentonville, Virginia tonight at Justin.tv and later on iTunes and YouTube. Joining me as he does about once a week from a different locale. This week, I think he's in on the front line in Libya, Bret Hrbek. Bret, welcome.
Thank you, Dan. How are you?
Bret is actually, I'm doing quite well. Bret's actually not in Libya. I'm very disappointed. He was supposed to be there to cover the whole revolution thing, and but alas, he's in Front Royal with his family, where he's safe and sound. Anyway, Bret, I know you are going to be one of the main reasons you came on the show tonight was to offer congratulations to President Obama for his handling of the Libya situation. Yet another Obama success story. Go ahead, give me all that.
Well, I guess we should take credit. We're credit when we're successful. So the fact that temporarily that Gaddafi's gone, somebody that the United States has been a thorn in our side for so many years, back to Reagan and probably before. It's a good thing. Unfortunately, I don't know that we can give the president any credit for it, besides the fact that he provided some logistical support to NATO and the other forces that really were the driving force and the boots on the ground. And I think it just shows his timid, pacifist nature, that he just doesn't want to use the American might. But he's gone. Gaddafi's gone, and now we just wait and see what happens next. And that's the biggest fear. Is I don't think that this administration has a plan for how to handle a post-Gaddafi Libya, and just like we didn't have a plan for the post or the new Egypt. So it's a bittersweet day that a tyrant's gone, but what is it? The king is dead. Long live the king.
Okay. On that note, I want to make an observation. When Twitter and Facebook and a few people were destroying the Mubarak regime, which, of course, was replaced by the same people who were running it under Mubarak, except Mubarak's not there. The same generals are running everything. All the right-wingers were freaked out about the Muslim Brotherhood. They're going to take over Egypt. And this is almost like it's a bad thing that they're overthrowing Mubarak, who got a lot of support from the U.S. I think U.S. soldiers were there during the entire revolution, training the soldiers. We're not hearing any of that now with Libya. Is that because it was all BS, that it was in fact a good thing that Mubarak was being overthrown through a popular revolution, or is it because there just isn't a Muslim Brotherhood presence in Libya?
Well, I mean, I don't know that there's what's going to come next. If it's a democratic regime, and that's the best case scenario, where they elect a leader that believes in representative government and a capitalist society and rights for its citizens, that's great. But the likelihood is it's going to follow the path where there's going to be a tyrant, and the U.S. policy has tended to be better my tyrant than their tyrant. At least the devil you know. And what the United States national security should be about is securing what's the best for the people of the United States. And we knew Gaddafi was a stable force there. We don't know what's going to happen next. That's not to say that it can't be good, but there's a lot of potential problems that could arise. And if the United States isn't going to be the strong leader in it and be the force for good, that's where I'm very concerned. And I don't see this president willing to do that.
There was some news today, the latest as of an hour ago, and I'm going to pull up our cheat sheet here to catch up on the latest. But basically, I guess the family, the wife, and some of the daughters, some of the kids have fled to Algeria, according to the Algerian news agency. One of the daughters was very, very pregnant and has since given birth in Algeria, according to the Algerian, according to a source there. And then the rebels say, although this, who knows if they know this, but they'd be dumb not to say this just to lower the morale of the Gaddafi troops. But they say that they have a very good idea where Gaddafi is, and that may or may not be the case. But anyone in their position would say that for several different reasons. And then it looks like they're in control of everything except this Sirte. I may be mispronouncing that, in another area. And Sirte is the hometown of Gaddafi, but it was a tiny village, and then under his regime it was built up to a city of 100,000 people. And apparently the state media has been feeding a lot of propaganda there, saying things like the rebels are surrounding the city, they're going to come in, they're going to rape the women, murder the men, and steal all the property. And so some of these folks are nervous about this. I find it hard to believe that in any kind of metropolitan area of 100,000 people that they could all believe this. But it's kind of like an interesting observation someone said during our discussion with a prominent civil rights leader here in Warren County. Someone made the observation, they said, you know, back in those days, it wasn't like all the white people were racist. Only about 10% of the people, if that, were actually the militant, anti-black, racist white people. But the other 90% of the white people were afraid of those 10%. And so I think you got a situation like that perhaps going on in Sirte. And also you have in other words, that there's a percentage there that support Gaddafi, and they have guns, and the last remnants of the Gaddafi military supporters are in Sirte. And so, you know, it's not a popular environment for anyone who doesn't feel that way. But who knows? We're not there, and your flight was canceled at the last minute, unfortunately, so you're not there either. I'm joking, by the way. Bret has no intentions, nor do I have any intentions to try to get him to go to Libya for us, at least not yet. Although if business opportunities open up there, then Bret will be the first on the second, third plane out there. And not for purely democratic reasons. But, so that's the status. I think it's an exciting time. This whole Arab Spring, I think it's a good name for it. It's so exciting that an observation was made 7 months ago. Muammar Gaddafi was in charge of all of Libya, unquestionably. And today he is running from one sewer to another, hiding. And rebels are walking freely in Tripoli, and I think that's a very exciting day. I hope that I'm glad that, I think in essence, I mean, I remember people like Larry Sabato were extremely critical, and Larry is no right-winger. We're extremely critical of President Obama's spending money to bomb targets and to use what they kept saying were our unique capabilities over there. And I'm excited. I'm glad we were part of it. I supported it then. I support it now. I think it's exciting. And I think that when these things are going on, and I know that I think Merkel in Germany is in trouble because of some of her for her reluctance in you know, kind of waiting to see which way the wind blows in these things, and then in some cases overreacting in others, like when she banned nuclear energy right after the Japanese incident. But I think that it wasn't a slam dunk. I think it wasn't necessarily something that his hardcore supporters would have fallen lockstep in support of. And although I was obviously being jocular and flippant with you in the beginning when I said you were here to praise him for that, but I do think it wasn't incredibly ballsy, but I think it was the right move. It wasn't necessarily a totally easy move for him to make, and I think I'm glad he did it because I think we have friends there now, whereas had we been hostile or non-supportive, although certainly we would have been supportive behind the scenes, even if not publicly, you know, and may have been for years, probably have been for years. But I think it's a good day for us. It's a much better day over there. And I think it's exciting anytime the flag of democracy, whatever religion it may represent, I think that it's looking like they're going to have they're moving toward a peaceful, largely secular regime. And I think it's an exciting day in Libya and an exciting day for the Arab Spring. So I'm pleased, as I'm sure you are. From our vantage point, from our 10,000 feet in the air vantage point looking down, you know. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, if what you just outlined is what the result of it is, I think that you're right. This is it's a great day for freedom and for the Middle East and for the United States to have another ally, and for the people of the region. I am not the advocate or the defender of democracy that you sound like you might be. because democracy can elect really, really bad people. I'm much more of a believer in capitalistic society, and democracy is the only one that's going to be able to flourish in. So that's why I'm a big supporter of democracy. But democracy is, in essence, when you boil it down, is mob rule. So, but I'm happy if what you just outlined is the case, and I'm really. I think that George Bush said every human being longs for freedom, and I do believe that's the case, and I hope that the people, a majority of them, come together and say we want to have a republic there that respects the rights of the individual as well as the rule of law.
Yeah, and I think you make an interesting point. Democracy, okay, Western-style democracy doesn't work everywhere. You could have, in Afghanistan, there are areas that have a 90% illiteracy rate. Little if no freedom of the press. Nobody's got a job. They all are smoking opium all day. I mean, I don't necessarily, maybe you need a strong man in that kind of situation. We need to bribe the strong man. I don't think it works. I think you have to have a fairly informed, if not educated, population. I think you need to have a good independent media, whatever form it may take, either on the web or, obviously, in my case, preferably in print, because that's what I do for a living. But jokingly aside, you need some kind of independent voice that is a watchdog for the powers that be that can operate in safety. And with those things and some other things, a strong freedom of speech, then you can have a democracy. You can't have it with just a state-controlled media and a puppet independent media where people can't really feel free to say what they think. A good example there would be Russia, where you really, they have a democracy, but it's very different from ours. Even in the UK, they don't have anything close to what we would call a First Amendment over there. Celebrities routinely can have things not be brought up in the public because there's no, like, you're a public figure in Warren County, so someone could say, well, I guess you're a former vice mayor and you're a potential candidate for some office in the future. So, and you were a town councilman before you were vice mayor. You were a candidate before that. You are clearly a public figure, and in that situation, someone could go in front in public and say something really negative against you. He's a crook or whatever, and you're not. But just I'm giving you an example. Right, he hates. Yeah, I said that happened. Now, someone. Okay, let's use this example. Someone. I'm not going to get too specific, but somebody wrote a letter about you that arguably cost you your last election, and it was a really mean letter. And I interviewed you about it on camera, I remember, at the time. And if you were a private citizen, if you were just some guy who, works as a maintenance man or a school teacher, and you were not a public figure elected to any office, you didn't routinely appear on television or radio, then that same letter could have been potentially libelous and actionable in court. You could have sued the person. But because you're a public figure and you're running for political office, it's a different set of standards. That doesn't mean you can't sue somebody if they blatantly say something that's inaccurate. Like you were, if someone wrote a letter that said you were convicted of 7 DUIs and you've never been convicted or charged in a DUI, then you could probably sue the person. But the line is very different for public figures. But in other countries, it's very different, where public figures can just straight up prevent something from from happening. There are scandals in Britain that people know about, but they can't say which rugby player or which cricket player is involved. So it's a whole different thing. So democracy, as we know it in our insular world, and I've been around the world, and you have. It's very different, and I've lived under military dictatorships in Liberia and in England and in India and Pakistan, and so I've seen the best and the worst that the world has to offer in terms of governments, and it's always interesting to see these things turn, and so I'm always excited when something like this happens, and I know that we both are optimistic about the future and hopeful that the folks in Libya finally get the freedom for which they have now fought for several months after being repressed by this brutal dictator. Now, back home here in the U.S. of A., The president is talking jobs, and I want to get your take on this. But I have some exciting news about some jobs that the president has created. I got an email today from the White House. I'm going to go ahead and look at this here. I'll share this with you. This is important news. I got this from the president, from the White House press office, from Jay Carney's crew. President Obama announces more key administration posts. And the paragraph, the president said, "Our nation will be greatly served by the talent and expertise these individuals bring to their new roles. I am grateful they have agreed to serve in this administration, and I look forward to working with them in the months and years ahead." So these, what they're referring to here as key administration posts: a member of the Cultural Property Advisory Committee, another member of the Cultural Property Advisory Committee, a member of the American Battle Monuments Commission, and my favorite, and if you could explain what this is to me, Brett, I will be very impressed, a member of the Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Access Board. So Brett will now explain. But hey, that's 4 jobs, Brett. That's nothing. Only 30 million left to go, right? We're going to hire them all, 4 at a time.
That's right.
What the hell is an Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Access Board? And this is referred to. This went out to the whole White House press corps, or everyone is on the list. I'm on the list. Obama announces more key administration posts. This is a key post. If this is a key post, we have problems. I'm sorry. Not to diminish the importance of the Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Access Board. Whatever the hell they do. We're both educated people. We're both intelligent. I'm 1 point away from genius, officially, on my IQ test, and I have no idea what an Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Access Board. But anyway, I'm being obviously humorous here, or perhaps not, but attempting to. But these are 4 government jobs. Isn't that kind of what do we do, man? I mean, we've spent. You have some experience dealing with Wall Street folks, but it seems like we had a crisis on Main Street, we had a crisis on Wall Street, and then everything they did, the administration run by, ex-Goldman Sachs people, including Tim Geithner and everybody else up there, that all the money and all the...
Well, to be fair, Tim Geithner he was never in the private sector at all, so...
I stand corrected. I thought he was Goldman Sachs. Are you sure?
No, he was. I'm pretty sure he never actually had a real job outside of government.
Well,
outside of the Federal Reserve system.
That's the only thing worse than being at Goldman. No, I'm just kidding. Is to not have ever. I'm gonna see if you are correct. Okay, so tell me, what do we do? Unemployment is at 9.2 officially, which means probably 20% of people who could work aren't. We keep extending unemployment, and all that does is, if I pay you to sit on your butt, you're going to continue to do that. I mean, let's be real, Mm-hmm. So, not that everyone, I mean, like if you're in Detroit and you're, there's like 50% unemployment, and all you know how to do is make cars, and I don't know what to do with that situation. I mean, retraining's needed, and what do you do when you're 50? Who's hiring you? I mean, that's a rough situation. But what do we do? I don't think the president knows what to do. I don't know if I hear vague things, and I don't want to hear vague generalities like unleash the private sector, get rid of burdensome regulation, all these talking points. That's crap. What specifically can we do so that folks like Craig Laird on Main Street in Front Royal, who owns a computer store, and the guy Vino Formaggio across the street from him, and these guys can start hiring people, and start what can we do to what's going on? I mean, are we going to go 17 years? Is this the Great Recession? Really? I mean, is it going to be, 10, 15, 20 years before we bounce out of this? What can we do? Can we do anything? The president can't affect where Hurricane Irene's going. Is it the same thing here?
No. This is the first thing they can do is just stop what they're doing. I mean, the National Labor Relations Board today came out with a ruling that makes it easier to unionize employees in companies by segregating the worker population. So, and put the burden on the employer to prevent the unions from being created. And I think that although unions in our history have played a vital role, we also know that now they drive up wages, they drive up costs, they drive employers to put to hire people outside of the United States. So let's curtail the power of the union, first of all, and that's by not putting new regulations out there. So, yeah, it may sound like a talking point, but put a moratorium on regulations. Let's take a look at what we actually have going right now. Then I think that there are not any new ideas. If you come along, and it's not necessarily going to help the Main Street businesses right away. I don't know that there is anything that Washington can or should be doing to help the Main Street businesses. What they should be doing is redirecting the resources or putting the rules so they're fair for everyone and allowing the free market to be unleashed. But and I mean by cutting the capital gains tax, by making cutting the marginal tax rates, giving some kind of stability and some kind of consistent policy that comes out. So the major corporations are sitting on trillions of dollars in cash assets right now, feel comfortable enough to put that money into job creation and research and development. The companies out there right now are so scared about what might happen that they're sitting on these cash reserves just to survive. And there has to be some confidence that comes out of Washington, D.C., and that confidence cannot be led by Obama, who just puts in there his new chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, who's a Princeton academic, by the way, who believes that raising the minimum wage creates jobs. That's contrary to everything I learned when I was at Virginia Tech in Economics 101. So, and this is the guy that's advising Obama. So I think the first thing we need to do is stop what we're doing, and we need to start rolling back some of these things like Obamacare and the financial regulation. The people I've talked to have said, you reverse Sarbanes-Oxley, you get rid of Sarbanes-Oxley, you get rid of some of these burdenous financial regs that were just passed this past year, and you will start to see a lot more money flow. You're going to see more people that are willing to take some risks, and you're going to just free people up from these financial regulations. You also you pointed out the small business. So the local banks have been hurt very, very strongly by the financial regulation bill, which Goldman Sachs wrote, by the way. And the reason Goldman Sachs wrote it, and they're okay with it, is because all of the compliance issues that are involved with the financial regulation, Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and the big banks already had in place. But Virginia Savings Bank, which is one of the local banks here in our community, a regional bank, they don't have a compliance department, so now they're spending $1 million or more a year instead of hiring people, have to do all the compliance testing and making sure that they're in compliance with what these Wall Street banks are requiring through their cronies in Washington D.C. So, pulling back the government, pulling back what's going on in Washington into the regulations, I think is one of the top things that we could do in order to start to turn the economy around. Because we don't have to necessarily turn it around immediately. We just need to change the perception and the consumer attitude and the confidence that we are moving in the right direction. And once we have that perception that we're moving in the right direction, we will start moving in that right direction because people won't be afraid to spend money anymore.
Specifically, when you say Sarbanes-Oxley and you say burdensome be specific. What about the Sarbanes-Oxley bill are you talking about?
Well, I'm not as familiar with it as I might like to be because it's not something I have to deal with directly every day. But there are a lot of reporting requirements that are included in that. There are a lot of different things that the different corporations are going to have to comply with for, I guess, quote, transparency. That a lot of them probably were doing or doing in some fashion. I don't know enough to be specific on it. I do know from people I've talked to that are in the know in that area have said that was one of the most detrimental things that could have happened to the markets, to the economy, because now corporations have had to divert money to comply with this law that they didn't have to before. And I personally think it's up to the consumer to make those decisions and do the investigation, and not require a company to have to spend the money. And I do know that Michelle Bachmann has a bill in the hopper to repeal both Sarbanes-Oxley as well as the financial regulation bill.
That bill was 2002. Now, Dodd-Frank was a direct. That was what year was that? That was 2010. So that was direct. That was a direct response to the 2008 disaster. A lot of the stuff I like. A lot of the stuff they passed. Everyone's freaked out about the Consumer Protection Bureau. I'm not. I think some of the stuff, like when they put on your credit card statement, it says, if you pay the minimum balance, it'll take you 38 years. Or if you pay an extra $100, you'll have it paid off in 2 years, and you'll save this much money. It's just transparency. It's like telling Stofers they have to print how many calories and how many fat grams or whatever on the box, which none of them wanted to do, and the Republicans opposed it when they passed that stuff. And then also the whole debit card thing. But it's interesting how that seems like such a good idea, but now you see the immediate effect in the banks with the debit card thing, where it used to be if you were at Walmart and you're buying something and you tried to charge something, they would put it through. Or if you try to put on your debit card, $38, or let's say it was $8, right? And then they would pay it and then charge you $30 or whatever. And you might have, and then you pay something for $2 and something for $6, and they charge you $30 a pop or whatever it is. And in some cases, they would make a point to put them in the order of the biggest first, so that you would go over your balance, and then the small charges would each incur a charge. And they changed that, so they can't do that. So now you have to opt into that. But by default, if you have $4 left in your checking account and you pass your debit card through at Walmart, and for an $8 charge, it will simply not be accepted, and there's no fee. That seems to make perfect sense to me. And I'm like, well, yeah, that if they have that ability, that should be the rule, and that should be the default position. And screw the banks, if they're. I mean, if it just makes sense to me. So they did that, and then the after effect is now all of a sudden, since the banks aren't making all that money, they're charging fees. Like First Bank here in Front Royal used to have free checking. Now they actually bought a domain name about avoidcheckingfees.com or something, and as a positive spin on the fact that they've really added checking fees to their accounts. And so sometimes these things that sound like a great idea, when they're put in place, they have if they're not making the money here, they're going to make it somewhere else. So sometimes these things that seem like a great idea at the time end up actually not being so hot, or having other negative things. And I don't know, the banks have to make money so they can keep building these little palaces on every street corner. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I don't know what you do, because you see something like 2008 happen, and you see gross incompetence at every level. I mean, everybody knew. I interviewed a lady on the radio about the house. She was pushing these liar's loans, these interest-only loans, and I asked her on the air, I said, what if the value goes down? Oh, well, that never happens. And I said, well, it could happen, right? And, of course, that's what happened. And, it was just institutionalized. The president, both parties' presidents were pushing it. Everybody, you should buy a home. Approve anybody. You're a cocktail waitress, you make $18,000 a year. Write down you make, $110 a year, and buy your $250,000 house. And now they're all foreclosing. So then they come up with these. I don't know. If you don't have any regulation, then that happens. And then you try to regulate it, and then you get they don't do it right, and then I don't know. It doesn't seem like it seems like some of the regulations are bad, some are good. I think they were all largely well-intentioned, or some of them were well-intentioned. Others were just corrupt because the people donate to the congressmen and senators, and so they put things in there to protect that special interest. But none of the things like loosening the regulation news around business and things like that, none of those seem like a short-term solution. They all seem like a long-term institutional solution. But it seems like we spent so much money on the stimulus plan, and we haven't gotten any jobs from it, except bureaucrats.
And that was, you're not going to. You're not going to get jobs by having make work projects. It's not going to happen. That Keynesian philosophy, it's just not accurate. You're going to have short term, a pop in the stimulus, and that's fine to put bread on the table for a week, but it doesn't give you the long-term advantage. I don't think there is a short-term answer. There's nothing that you can, except maybe make a payroll holiday, an income tax holiday. Frankly, my suggestion, if you're going to spend $1 trillion doling out money to the states to build bridges and whatnot, is to say everybody's exempt from the income tax this year, and I take my 15 or 20% that I pay, and I'd pay off debt, and I'd go out to dinner, and I'd do a whole lot of things that I want to do, and the economy would flourish a little better and that's a better way to spend $1 trillion than what we did. So, but I don't know that there is anything immediate, except if they're going to start taking steps. If we started taking steps to rein in the deficit, and to bring us back to a balanced budget, make our tax cuts permanent, as opposed to still this question mark about what's going to happen in 2 years, whether it's the estate tax or whether it's marginal rates or capital gains or dividend taxes. If we started making efforts to roll back and repeal Obamacare, that businesses could then start making decisions. You're going to have, one, you'll have the money being spent, and two, you'll have the perception that things are getting better, and the perception will drive.
Brett, did we lose you? Let me see. I think we lost Brett. Brett, I can't hear anything you're saying, buddy. Let me see what's going on.
Next year, you're willing to take a little bit of chance and start spending some money to buy those luxury items, or even just to bring yourself up to a level of sustenance that you have been depriving yourself of for the past couple months and year because you're afraid of what's going to happen next. And there's a lot of pessimism in this country right now, and I think until we have a leader that's talking about what's good in America and about what's good about the American worker and the optimism that we have for the future of this country, and how we are the best workforce, we are the best country, we are that shining city on the hill, and not just another country that's a part of this global community. I don't think we're going to see any kind of major recovery.
Well, I don't know. Part of you were cut out a little bit there. I apologize. Brett, someone mentioned.
You still there?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Because you cut out for a little bit earlier. Can you hear me at all?
No.
Brett, are you there? I can hear you now, but I couldn't hear you before. Brett cannot hear us. Let me see what's going on. Okay. Brett, Dan to Brett, are you there? Can you hear me? This is a new one. Okay, well, what I'll do, let me see. I think I'm gonna call him and tell him. Let me see what he's. I apologize. All right. Hopefully he's going to call back. 55. Oh gosh, what do we got? Okay. Well, I want to. I'm not sure what to do. What I'll do is I'm going to put him on. I'm going to try. I can't do that, can I? I don't have the cable for that. Let me try to call his cell number here. He was on a roll too. going to call him and try to get a little. Someone asked for some bio information about Bret, so I'm going to do that real quick. I'm on our little thing. I don't know how do I call somebody? Call guest. How do I do that? All right, 540. Ooh, I shouldn't be saying this number out there. All right, we're going to call Bret and see if we can get him.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system. 54.
All right, this is bad. We're connected through Blog Talk Radio, and Bret.
I'm here.
All right. Yeah, I don't know what happened. For a while, I couldn't hear you, but apparently you could hear me, and then you couldn't hear me, but we could hear you. So welcome back. Real quick, we had a did you want to finish up that? Because I have another thing I want to ask you.
No, I don't know where I was. You just missed a really good end of my patriotic Go America speech. So
I could have put da da da. All right, let's do a little bio. Bret Hrbek is in Front Royal, Virginia, and he is sort of a business guy. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Someone was asking if we could have a little more bio information for him.
Sure. Well, I'm from Front Royal, Virginia, which is about 70 miles west of Washington, D.C., in the Shenandoah Valley. Grew up here. Went to Virginia Tech, did a stint in Washington, D.C. as the vice president of a 501c4 conservative organization during the late 90s, where I was very much involved with the impeachment process and trying to prevent McCain-Feingold from passing, which we were successful while I was there. Unfortunately, after I left, we weren't. But then I came back to Front Royal, started a business here, and I've been doing that for the past 10 years. I ran for town council of Front Royal once, lost, ran again, won. That was in 2006. Served on the council for 4 years, and 2 of those years I was the vice mayor. During that time period, we really, I think, turned Front Royal around. We brought in a manager from the private sector who happened to be from Front Royal, went off and did a whole lot of great CEO type of things, emerging companies and all that in the paper industry. And we brought him in to turn Front Royal around from a place that really had a negative attitude. The government was somewhat inefficient, as governments tend to be, and he came in and did a great job. I was really excited about that. One of the biggest projects that he brought to us was putting together a portfolio of power. Front Royal is one of the few municipalities in Virginia that own our own electric department, and we were able to buy blocks of power at different rates from different sources. We have hydro and natural gas, and we have coal, and then we buy from the normal contracts. And then we also had a major exploration of getting into the solar business on a big way. Then in 2010, as was alluded to a little earlier, I was attacked viciously for being a liberal by a crazy man, frankly, and that contributed partly to my loss. The other part was the fact that I was brave enough to actually suggest that we needed to raise taxes to fill in a $600,000 budget deficit when we had already been cutting spending for the past 4 years. So that's lands me here. Right now I'm a commentator. I'm kind of like the fired football coach that gets to go on ESPN and talk about his former colleagues and make observations. I do that on the radio. Occasionally do that in Dan's paper, and I get to do this gig, and I've got a family, and just living life and watching politics and making my wife crazy by always complaining about the liberal ideology.
All right. That's Bret.
Is that enough?
Yeah, I have Bret on because he's an interesting guy, and he follows national politics. He worked in that arena a little while, and he's just interesting. And he's one of those guys I think is going to do something at some point, even bigger than being on this show. Huh?
the picture that you put up there was a picture. I can't remember if that was I either took that with Phyllis Schlafly forum or Ed Meese, the former attorney general for Ronald Reagan, so who I work with both of them on a regular basis when I was in Washington. So I was pretty keyed into some real top conservative leaders in the country.
I'm gonna that is yeah, I found that, I don't know, it was it's a good shot, so I use it. It makes you look like you're always, smiling, and even when you're yelling at me. But that's Bret. Yeah, he's sort of a Republican. He kind of balances things because Emily, my main political writer for the Lynchburg Times, is an NPR listening journalism major, right? Master's degree in journalism, and she's kind of on the opposite political spectrum as Bret, and so it's interesting to balance things out. And then I got to do a quick funny thing, and then I want to ask Bret's opinion on this fish and wildlife thing. And but first, I want to show two pictures that one of our viewers, Scott, did. This one's really good. This is picture one. This is a reference to my fish and wildlife rant last night. And then let me bring the other one up here. Let's see. I guess these are cropped. Let me see if I can uncrop this sucker here. Then Scott, I just got to show off because they're pretty good. This one is I'm defeating Muammar Gaddafi, but he's real detailed. He's a regular viewer because the stuff he comes up with. The first one he did, he had me holding up my current phone, and he knows I like Star Trek, and so he had me on Captain Kirk's body, holding my phone, and there was something else I can't remember. I'll put that one up another time. But anyway, Scott, who has lots of free time and loves our shows, and always gives me good constructive criticism, and helps maintain our chat room now with Angie. So that's awesome. Okay, so I was on this rant that he's referring to here in his fish and wildlife photo, but basically they raided Gibson Guitar. This was in the news. I don't know if you caught this. It was kind of a weird story, but they went in there. This is the same outfit that the 11-year-old girl was at her dad's house, and she rescued a baby woodpecker that her dad's cat was going to eat. And she goes to Lowe's, and then this special agent is there, and she gets a $550 ticket. And then, my whole thing is, why do we have a Fish and Wildlife federal agency that's that big and that well funded that they have time for this nonsense? When we have 50 state, I assume 50. I don't know if there's some states that don't, but I know that Virginia has a Game and Inland Fisheries Department, which deals with game and fisheries, similar to what Fish and Wildlife would do. And then she made the point that, I'm focusing on the plane crash, which doesn't mean that all planes aren't safe, and that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is the logical point to argue against me. But the point is that this lady, she said they said that it shouldn't have gone through because she tried to. But the whole thing was, why the hell would you think a woodpecker is worse off in a cage to be released somewhere than in a cat being digested? And the fact that she and her supervisor, perhaps some magistrate and some state troopers there when they're delivering the ticket, and nobody has a problem with this. It just tells me that it's grown too big, and I'm questioning the need for all of those divisions. I mean, I'm not saying get rid of the Fish and Wildlife Service, but someone's got to protect the eagles. But isn't this insane? I mean, am I wrong here? It's just like this. Why do we have state troopers on state highways, not like 66 or 81, but they're running speed traps when every square inch of Virginia is under the jurisdiction of a sheriff elected by the people in that county, and except for cities who have a different, police department appointed, whose chief is appointed by their locally elected board. And it seems like we have a lot of overlap. We have lots of money to spend on these things, and meanwhile, we're spending too much, and no one can find anything to cut.
Right. Well, in a country that's 300 million people and spans 2,500 miles from east to west, and and you throw in Alaska and Hawaii. The idea that we can have one national government that is involved with all these aspects in our lives is absolutely ridiculous. You're going to get what we get now. And actually, we're probably doing pretty well for that, because it could be a whole lot worse. The more local that you make the decision-making process, the better off we're all going to be. It may be a little bit less efficient when it comes to money, because we have 50 agencies, and then every county has their own agency. But the least the decisions are being made on the local level, you're going to have real personalities, real people that are interacting with each other outside of that particular bureaucratic rule and regulation. So Washington, D.C. should be involved, frankly, with protecting the borders, protecting our national security, throwing a little bit of the FBI in there, and not much else. And the rest of these jobs should be regulated to the states where they belong, where it's a little bit closer to home. And then the states should even turn around and delegate most of those responsibilities down to the county and city and parish levels, where even more decisions are going to be locally made. So that's really where the English common law and the American system works the best, is when we're at the level of a town hall meeting, and not when you have to write a letter to your congressman that's going to get it fed through some legislative assistant who's going to send you out a form letter.
This is why I am a big believer in sunsets. I even suggested this to a candidate who was running for something. I said, you know what you ought to do if you're looking for some radical new thing to come out and be different? Sunset every law. The Code of Virginia, for example, because we're both in Virginia, it says that every time someone's charged with a crime, it says you're charged with this section, under the Code of Virginia 1950 as revised over the years. Why should we be subject to laws written and never reviewed since by somebody, in some cases, from the 1800s? So... Mm-hmm. Like some of these, like you were talking about Sarbanes-Oxley, and I brought up Dodd-Frank, but these things sound great at the time. We've just had a financial crisis. Let's do something to prevent this in the future. But that should not be the law of the land in perpetuity. That should be the law of the land for 5, 10, 15 years, maybe max, depending on what kind of law it is. But there should be no law that would last forever, because it should all have an expiration date, and then it should just expire unless Congress acts to reinstate the law. And some of these things that everyone thinks are great, like first-degree murder is illegal. I mean, those will be like on a consent agenda. After 10 years, this is the consent agenda to redo these. But some of these things people fuss about, and Congress will have to take an affirmative vote for it in order for it to continue. And that's different from not acting. It's different from saying, Congressman Wolf, Congressman Smith, Congressman Jones, I want you to act on this law that's on the books that's bad and do something about it. One example, the crack reform bill, where it really was kind of unfair that the sentence for crack, which is largely a drug used by minorities, the sentences were much harsher by federal mandates than for powder cocaine for the same amount of drug, right? I don't think it's coincidental that like rich white people would use the thing with the lower penalty, and poor black people would use crack, which had a higher penalty, and that's not fair. You don't treat people differently. Whether that was the intent of the law, I don't know. I think it was just like they saw this in the inner city, and it was like people murdering each other, and a race between D.C. and Richmond and Atlanta to see who could have the highest murder rate every year. And so they passed this stuff to crack down on the main thing that they felt was contributing to it. But in the end, they look back and they're like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem fair. All the black people are getting twice as many sentences as the white people. So they reformed this. But it's harder to get someone to vote for getting to weaken a drug law, right? Because that's not politically popular, than it is to. But if that law if that reform had simply had a sunset period, then they all expire, and then Congress has to act affirmatively to enacted again. And I think every law, I think that would solve a lot of problems. And every minute they spend reviewing stuff from before is a minute they can't spend passing new laws to torture us.
That's right.
I think this is a big thing. I think this is like a great idea, that not just because I came up with it.
No, I mean I've been thinking the same thing, that having law sunsets it keeps things up to the times, gets rid of bad legislation, bad law, and it also gives people a fighting chance to come back and fix things that may have been a mistake or perceived mistake, and not have the court have to constantly step in and put their nose where it doesn't belong. Because too many laws have unintended consequences. The only downside I see to it, frankly, is that business and the economy likes consistency, and if every 10 years the law could be changing, that's going to affect some decisions on what people are doing with their money. But I think that will be factored in, and that's a perfectly good expense for rational sunsetting. So I'm with you on it. Let's get that done. We do that. We get rid of the income tax, the 16th Amendment, and go to a national sales tax, and get the states to start electing our senators again, as opposed to direct elections, and we'll have a pretty good country once again.
In Front Royal, you are the vice mayor of Front Royal. There's on the code today. There's a law. How familiar with the town code?
What? I haven't memorized.
Remember, folks, he's a politician. He can't help himself. All right. There's in the town. I was trying to find it real quick, but I can't. There's a thing in there. It says, if the police encounter a machine that it's basically saying condoms or prophylactics, a machine that dispenses products for the prevention of venereal disease, the machine can be immediately destroyed by the police, and the owner of the business can receive a fine, and it's a misdemeanor or something. But it actually says venereal disease. So if you sell anything in a vending machine that has the benefit of preventing VD, you can be fined, and they can destroy it on the spot. And then for a while, of course, you couldn't play pool after midnight, but you could bowl after midnight. You could play tennis after midnight. You know, they got rid. I think you guys got rid of that. It's illegal to drink after midnight in Front Royal, even though that law would be the ABC. But technically, it's illegal to consume alcohol after midnight on premises, but it's not enforced. I mean, but all these weird rules that are on the books would all be gone, because, you know, the whole you can't bathe your donkey on Sunday. I mean, these crazy laws you read about, which are largely urban fiction now, that they've been cleaned up, but it's great for the web fodder. But yeah, I think that's an interesting thing we should pursue. We're probably out of time. Do you have any other things you want to hit on that we talked about, or that we haven't talked about?
One of the things that I recommend reading is I'm a quarter of the way through, is Mark Stein's new book, After America. And if you want to be scared straight, read that book. It's great stories. I like a lot of these things that we just talked about. Stein's done a great job with his humor. Things like how California businesses cannot offer free donuts and coffee any longer because of health regulations, and they have to get permits, and they have to bring in professional ones, and how churches and at Fish Fries in Pennsylvania can't sell pies for a fundraiser unless they're baked in state-certified kitchens, all these kind of things, and just the leviathan that the American government has become, that we're becoming a nation for a government as opposed to a government for a nation. And I think it's an important distinction. Mark does a great job on this, and I would encourage you to pick up the book, and if you really want to see how we're going down the same path that Greece has gone. Greece is over the edge. I think Mark puts it, Greece is going over the waterfall. We are maybe a couple miles from the waterfall, and our solution, instead of paddling to the side and take a break to get off and turn around, is to paddle faster towards the waterfall, and that's what we did with the bailout. So I think it's a great book to be scared straight for any of our liberal friends out there to really realize what the devastation that we're causing, that's being caused right now by this administration, by crony capitalism, and all the problems that we've been talking about every week that you've had me on your show.
What about waivers? Just on that thing, and that reminded me, you're talking about some of these regulations, and I've heard similar stories about a church that was getting food from leftover food from restaurants and bringing it to like disabled veterans. I mean, just like who would be against this, right? And the state comes in, oh, you don't have you have to maintain this temperature, blah blah blah, and no one's dying, no one's getting sick from this. You know what I mean? And it's no more dangerous than the third hour of any picnic you've ever been on. But it's they shut it down, so they can't do this. It's just stupid. And I wonder if you let the mayor. What if you said the mayor, who's elected and answerable to the people and responsive to the people more so than any bureaucrat who works for the town of Front Royal, for example? Remember the stupid rule about the flags on Main Street? I think Craig Laird, the Royal Computers guy, and some others were trying to put flags up to drum up business for Main Street, which is under a constant pressure from the strip malls. And Front Royal, as many towns do, actually has a functional Main Street with businesses you can actually, not just lawyers and doctors' wives with antique stores and boutiques that no one ever goes in, but actually businesses. Businesses where you can go and you can dine, you can get your computer fixed, you can get your clothes cleaned, whatever, and people actually go there. It's really cool. It's a beautiful Main Street, Front Royal, and I'm just saying that because it's a reference point for both of us. But this is all over the country. There are places like this, but they were putting flags up, and the town came down on them. You're violating whatever, and then it was just so stupid. But they're like, well, that's the law. We'll change the damn law. What if the mayor could waiver any regulation in the town? And then when you have something that's so stupid, the mayor who's answerable to the people, right? Because the bureaucrats could care less. They just, I'm doing my job, standard operating procedure, You can be a moron and be a bureaucrat, no problem. But an elected official is more responsive. What if the mayor had the authority to give a waiver or something? What's a way that's this kind of thing, or does the current system work?
Well, on that situation, if it was ordinance, which I think it was, the council could have just easily have said, we're going to advertise for the month, bring in the public, that we're going to have a repeal of this ordinance, we're going to have a public hearing, and we vote twice. Take about 6 weeks to get that done. I don't think they can declare that an emergency and speed up the process. That's, as you are aware, Virginia is a Dillon rule state, so all the localities have to follow the rules prescribed by the General Assembly, and they can't do anything different that the General Assembly has said that they can or can't do. So there is a procedure that they have to follow. Whether that's a good idea that the mayor do that or not, it's just not an idea that's allowed in Virginia. But there is a mechanism that they could have easily taken care of that. And as a matter of fact, I think they have in the past passed temporary waivers as a council in anticipation that they were going to go ahead and repeal the ordinance anyway. So we actually, the permit thing, we just did that. They just did that with the permits, I think, where we say, okay, it's okay, we're going to kind of look the other way, or we are going to ignore this because we know we're going to get rid of it. We just have to go through the proper time procedure that's they give the public its time to react to the change. So. But hey, there's another example though. When you brought the pool, playing pool, that was a time, and it's an example where even a relatively conservative area like Front Royal just cannot let go of the rules and the ability to need to control. We had a billiards owner come to the town and say, right now it's illegal to play pool after midnight, which is, I don't understand that at all. And he said, I would like to go to 2:00. I just want to go to 2:00 so we can stay up until the alcohol sales. ABC said you can't sell alcohol for 2:00. I said to the council, I said, why don't we just get rid of this law, period? Why should the town of Front Royal be in the business of governing when somebody can play pool? Why should it be 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock? What if they wanted to do an all-night tournament? What is it our business? You can bowl all night, but you can't pool. And as a matter of fact, our bowling alley had to cordon off the area where the pool tables were after midnight because nobody would want to play pool, even though they could bowl right next to it. And I also argue that at 2 o'clock, the pool tables are going to shut down because that's when the alcohol sales have to stop anyway, and nobody's going to be there after that. Yet members of our council could not bring themselves, and relatively conservative, but people that said they were conservative and believed in limited government, could not bring themselves to just repeal a law that was a ridiculous restriction on our freedom to live a life that we want to, and quote, compromise at 2 o'clock. That I think is an example where no matter what level of government you're in, whether it's the local government, the sheriff, the council, the supervisor, mayor, governor, congressman, president, secretary general of the United Nations, master of the universe, we just cannot give up that little control, and it just starts to eat away. And I never was a believer in term limits until several years ago because I believe that restricted your ability to vote for who you wanted to. But I just think that we definitely need a mechanism to get people out of office because they become too ingrained in the people that go there with the best of intentions.
It's the people's fault, though, Brett.
Little by little.
It's the people's fault. If they elect idiots repeatedly, then they reap what they sow, and screw them, you know? I mean, what can you do? I mean, look at some of the guys on there are just ignorant rednecks, and I mean, straight up on the front row of town council, and they keep getting.
Talking about town council.
I'm talking about front row of town council, which is you know has some ignorant rednecks. Some have are violent bullies, and it's just they vote them in, and if that's what they want, then that's what they get. It's just frustrating, you know. But what can you do? All right, 2 quick questions here. What does Bret Hrbek think of Ron Paul? Is the first one, and what do you think of getting rid of the income tax and doing a sales and use tax like a VAT, which is popular in Europe? First, Ron Paul, and we're way over time, so we should do a quickie here.
Okay, I like Ron Paul a lot. I don't think he needs to be the president of the United States. I agree with him on most everything. I'm more of an interventionist when it comes to protecting our national security, our national interests overseas, and he definitely is. But I'm a big fan of his since I was in D.C. and one of the guys that I'm proud of, I snagged a picture with about 10 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I'm not as much more interventionist than he is. I'm less non-interventionist than he is, if that's a fair distinction. And he is great. I agree with his sentiment completely. I don't agree with his implementation. Like, I don't think we should be on a gold standard and have our currency tied to not that I want to be Zimbabwe, but it is nice to know that worst case scenario we can just print money if we had to pay the national debt. And I don't want to be tied to some gold standard which is has suffered wild fluctuations that are completely out of our control, just like oil. But he's going to be
I agree with him on those things, but he's going to be a marginal representative. He's never going to be the person that has any legislation passed, which is not to me, that's not a symbol of success anyway. But what he does, I think plays an important role in the Republican Party by being a conscious voice, if you will, making sure that Republicans are pulling them to the constitutional areas. Because I know pragmatically we don't have a majority in the Senate. We don't have a conservative majority necessarily in the House. We have to compromise in order to keep the lights on, so to speak, make sure the troops are paid. He's not going to do that, but I think he's an important portion of the overall conference in order to continue to remind everybody else of the constitutional role that they have. So Dr. No is a great term for him, but that's not going to get we're going to have to be incremental in our rollback, just like the liberals were incremental in their encroachment of our rights. When it comes to the income tax, I'm opposed to the income tax. I think it's a fodder for lobbyists to play in, congressmen and senators to pass out favors. We're in all this trouble because we have the ability to carve out special classifications for people, give certain people credits, other people deductions, and some people don't pay taxes, other people do. If we had, I don't like. I like it's national sales tax. You just throw on whatever it is, 10 or 12% on the final end product. Everybody pays. You get rid of, you tax the black market, and you control how much you pay in taxes. If you don't want to pay taxes, you don't buy anything. You don't want to, you don't want to pay taxes on that boat, you don't buy that boat. If you don't want to pay taxes on that soda, you don't buy that soda. Where income tax is way too easy for you to manipulate your way out of it by gaining favors, flat across the board. Nobody's playing favorites, and you get to choose personally how much you're going to pay.
All right, awesome. All right, okay. I'm gonna wrap it up, and then Bret, I got a quick question for you. I'll call your cell in just a couple minutes. I got a question. Okay, awesome. I want to thank Bret Hrbek, and I guess you are on Google Plus, right? You are at gplus.to/Hrbek, Hrbek. You can check Bret out. And Bret, the chat room informed us that you need to be more. You need to write, or you need to write something on Google Plus once in a while. But I know you're busy,
Okay.
in the Bahamas and Hawaii and all those things. Those arduous trips you have to make, and we feel for you. But in between the torture of going to those sunny places, if you could, post something on Plus once in a while and beef up your bio a little bit. So Bret is former vice mayor of Front Royal, Virginia. Once on again, off again, Republican politician. Probably be on again before too long. We love having him on the show. I'm Dan McDermott. You can catch me at gplus.to/McDermott. And I'm very exhausted today. If it showed, I apologize, but I was moving stuff from Lynchburg to Front Royal and got here about an hour before the show started, which is why I was late. But anyway, thanks. I'll be back tomorrow night with Emily Williams, my NPR listening cohort in Lynchburg, Virginia, for another edition of McDermott Report. Have a great night.